Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, Derek and I have a video today that you guys were asking for in the initial Steam Machine review. That is because I called the Steam Machine an emulation powerhouse, and you guys wanted an update EmuDeck install guide for Steam Machine. And the nice thing is, it's also an EmuDeck install guide for the Steam Deck, because this is one piece of software that's going to work across both pieces of hardware. And because I haven't done an update to my EmuDeck install guide in some years now, just because the Steam Deck videos kind of ran their course, we're going to be going over the entirety of that today, because it's going to make emulating basically every system out there that much easier. And just so you know, on some of the more complex systems like PlayStation 3 with RPCS3 emulation on Steam Machine, I will have tutorial videos for those specific emulators, just because unlike stuff like Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, the otherwise, I feel like they actually need their own videos because you guys have been asking for them, and they are pretty useful for the future. But when I mean the Steam Machine is absolutely an emulation powerhouse for its small size, I totally mean it. I get that you can make a system for maybe $300 more that would rival it, but it's one of those things, if you just want that big screen living room experience, you want all your emulation in gaming mode, then this is definitely going to do everything you possibly need and more. And that really is the nice thing about the Steam Machine, and in conjunction with the Steam Deck, which is still amazing even if it's getting a little bit long in the tooth. And the nice thing is, if you set up cloud saves, which I will show you, you can do something like play these games on your Steam Deck out and about in the world, so long as you have an internet connection. When you come home and sit on your Steam Machine, if you set it up the way I show you, you'll be able to just basically pick up where your gameplay left off, which is going to be a very nice feature. Now the first thing you need to do is you need to go to the EmuDeck website, emudeck.com, and you're going to see a download button right here. Obviously that's going to be the most important thing. And then you're going to see that you have different icons for different operating systems. Obviously we're on SteamOS because this is a Steam Machine emulation tutorial. And you go ahead and double click that program that you downloaded, and it'll basically load up into this launcher. From here, I highly recommend you choose custom modes that gives you all the different abilities to be able to go ahead and pick all your settings, and I like saving it to the internal storage. As of right now, we're just going to show Steam Deck, not Steam Machine. I'm sure that will be updated in the future, but nothing will be an issue there. And I recommend you go through Steam ROM Manager so you can have all of your games in your Steam library in gaming mode without having to go through a front end. Yes, front ends are fun, they come with a lot of themes, but honestly, this is just how I prefer. And you'll see here by default the installation is going to bring down these emulators. You'll see a couple are unselected. I would have selected them here if I wanted them, but I'm going to show you how to do that secondarily because I do want MGBA as well as Rosalie's Mupen GUI, but I'll show you how to install them secondarily. Configure autosave, I like that. It'll automatically save and load your game on the next boot. As far as bezels are concerned, you can pick and choose them, whatever it is you want. And at this point in time, you can also enter in your retro achievements. You get to decide what to do here, and if you change your mind later on, I will show you exactly how to change these settings so that you can get everything basically configured again, because you don't need to go through this setup guide and go ahead and pick all these options from the installation. Once you have the EmuDeck application actually installed, you're going to be able to make these changes on the fly in desktop mode, which is a really nice kind of quality of life feature. If you change your mind in the future and you want to do something completely different, you're like 2 clicks away from making that happen, and some of these things can even be done in gaming mode, but you do need to be comfortable in desktop mode. It's one of those things, it's going to be a lot easier. So once you actually have all of your different options, go ahead and hit finish, and then it'll just run for like 5 or 10 minutes in the background, and then from there you're going to have all the emulation set up, minus any sort of BIOS files that you're going to need to run them, and of course any of your legally owned games. We'll get into how to install those in the second part of the video, but just don't rush through the EmuDeck installation process. Go ahead and read all the options. If you have retro achievements, log in then. If you want to do stuff like change the options later on, it is easy to do, but just kind of take your time. That way you get everything you want the way you want it the first time. So when EmuDeck is installed, you'll see an EmuDeck desktop icon on the Steam Machine in desktop mode. If you want to make any changes, go ahead and double click that and you'll get to the EmuDeck menu. You'll see here there is a little bit of a news section up front, not all that exciting, but it does show you a couple of games of the month and other things that you can download so you can play them on your Steam Machine or your Steam Deck. And on the left hand side of the screen are going to be all the different settings you can do, and you'll see here, if you go to quick settings, all of those different things like screen bezels and aspect ratios are going to be available here to change as well. But in the actual installation, it's going to ask you about your desired resolution for some of the emulators. That's going to actually happen in the EmuDeck app itself, and I will show you how to change that because honestly it's a lot easier than going into each individual emulator and selecting your resolution. Outside of something like PlayStation 3, I feel like that's actually done better in the app. But the nice thing is, you're never stuck with one option you pick when you install EmuDeck, and the minute you push the toggle, it's going to save and you'll be perfectly fine. I recommend maybe once a month you go into Manage Your Emulators and you hit Update, and you'll hit both Update Flatpak as well as App Images. This will bring down the most recent version of every single emulator. The only time I don't recommend you do this is if you're deep into a game and you want to finish it, because for the most part regressions aren't that common anymore, but I'd hate for you to be like hour 40 into a 60-hour RPG, you update something and then suddenly you realize it doesn't work anymore. You're going to also update those app images, just different installations, and you'll see a comprehensive menu of everything that's going to be updated. So if you hit OK again, it takes about a minute or so, and then everything will be fresh to the most recent submitted version of those emulators out there, and that's definitely important, especially with stuff like RPCS3, everything else like that. They do update regularly, so you want to keep on top of that. And then from here, if you do decide you want to install a new emulator after you actually went through the installation, if you go to Manage Emulators and pick the options that are grayed out, you'll see a button here that says Install. This is how you install an emulator that you didn't pick from the initial setup guide later on down the line. Because I know this trips a few people up, so it's one of those things. Now you know how to install them if you didn't, and everything else should be pretty smooth sailing from there. And this is going to be the entire selection window here, so if you want to add anything, if you want to delete anything, this is how you're going to be doing it in the EmuDeck app, and honestly it's pretty powerful. The only thing you need to realize is if you want something like Eden, you're going to have to manually install that yourself. EmuDeck will not bring that down for you, but it will configure the controls at least. I think that's just because they're being sensitive to Nintendo and what Nintendo loves to do out there, but I will be doing an overall Switch emulation test on the Steam Machine just to show you guys the performance. I'm not sure on a setup guide yet or not. I'll kind of feel how I like to take the risk that day when I do it, but trust me, it is very good and it's definitely something you should check out. But before you leave that question in the comments saying, where's my Eden emulator? Now you know you have to manually install it. Now going over to import games and BIOS, I recommend manual copy. Automatic import has never really worked well for me. It always has curatorial issues on the folder structure, at least in my experience. And this way, if you do it manually, you'll know exactly where everything goes. So you can go ahead and click open folder, and you're going to see both a BIOS folder as well as a ROMs folder. And this is a little tricky. If there is a folder, that means the BIOS for that system needs to go in that folder. If there is not a folder and the system requires a BIOS, you're just going to put it in the BIOS folder, not in anything nested. So something like a PlayStation 1 BIOS here, and don't worry, I own a bunch of different PlayStation 1s, including the one that has this BIOS. You will just put them in the BIOS folder, not in anything nested. And if you click on BIOS checker here, everything that's installed correctly will come up green. If it's red, that means you either didn't install it or your file is bad and you need to go back and do it again. The only place I don't recommend using this is if you need the firmware for PlayStation 3. You can download that from Sony's website and you go over to the RPCS3 app, and don't worry, I will have a custom tutorial just on PlayStation 3 emulation, and you'll install that by hand because I find that EmuDeck doesn't really curate that all that well all the time. Sometimes it just completely misses the file that it should be looking for. I'm really not sure why, not a huge strike, but just a thing I've notated. And as far as all of your games, they're going to be clearly located in folders. So if you want to do something like put an N64 game on your Steam machine, you're going to put it in the N64 folder. And obviously for this example, I'm going to go into the PlayStation 3 folder to talk about PlayStation 3 emulation. You'll see that that game is there, and that's all we need to do to get it into game mode, but I'll show you that in a moment. But if you want to change the screen resolution, this is what I've been using for the emulator resolution. PlayStation 1 4K, PlayStation 2 4K. I left PlayStation 3 at 1080 just for some of my testing. Switch at 1440p, GameCube and Wii at 4K, Wii U at 4K, Nintendo DS at 4K, and 3DS at 4K as well. You can change these at any point in time in the emulator or in the EmuDeck app, but that's just kind of the defaults that I kind of worked with. And if you didn't have a Retro Achievements account when you first signed up for EmuDeck and downloaded everything, this is where you can enter in your username and password here. Because I know a ton of you love those Retro Achievements. Me personally, I don't use them, so leave me a comment down below, Retro Achievement fan, yes or no. And that's kind of just basically something. It is a bonus feature. And if you click on the EmuDeck compressor tool icon on the left side of the screen, you'll see here if you hit run the compression tool, it'll compress all the games that will run in emulators that can decompress them in real time. So something like Dolphin for both GameCube and Wii will do that, and in my testing there really isn't any overhead penalty because the Steam Machine has power to spare on most of these things if you actually compress your games and run them that way. And if you want to save some space on your hard drive, it definitely is a really nice feature. And for me personally, I just go ahead and install all of the emulators on the actual drive that SteamOS is installed on, and I use a USB-C hard drive around the back for the games, and that has been perfectly efficient, and I haven't had any issues whatsoever running it off an external. So if you just want the 512GB model, you can save some dollars there as well. Now, if you go to the Cloud Save tab, you'll see here we have both sync as well as backup. For sync, for those saves to go from a Steam Deck to a Steam Machine or any other Steam OS that you're logged into, you're going to have to be a Patreon member. If you just want cloud backups, you just go ahead and hit backup. You'll have all the different options here, so you can kind of pick and choose how you want that. And you'll also see a tab for EmuDeck that allows you to change some settings within game mode. I can't stress enough, you definitely want to install that. I'm really surprised that they don't install that by default when they launch EmuDeck. I guess they're giving users more options as to how they want to control the software. For me personally, EmuDeck is must software. It is essential and you definitely want to have it. Now, as far as gyroscope is concerned, this is more for the gyros in the Steam Deck, but if you do have a controller, I tested this and it worked relatively well, although not every single emulator was picking it up the same way as something like EmuDeck would. And as far as power tools, this is going to allow you to change some stuff for maximum performance on the CPU and GPU, but that was more for batteries on the Steam Deck and the TDP envelope. So this is something you can play around with it, but I haven't found a need for it personally yet, but now you know where it is. The only other thing you need to do is if you actually have an issue with any control bindings in an emulator, go into the emulator management and reset the configuration. That usually fixes everything. Now, if you click Launch Steam ROM Manager here, you'll be able to see all the parsers for all the different game folders that are installed with EmuDeck, and this is where you're actually going to bring them into gaming mode. And you'll see if something's missing, you can turn it on by default, but for the most part, this will model exactly what you have installed on your actual EmuDeck installation. So you go ahead and hit Parse here, and then you will see everything that we have available, all the emulators that are standalones, including the one game I've added just to do this recorded tutorial. Everything will be here. You can change the art, but honestly, in my opinion, that only works half the time. You'll see here, I add the art, I go ahead and hit Save to Steam, and then the art actually doesn't show up in desktop mode. It just seems to be something that EmuDeck has always struggled with, but honestly, not that big a deal to me personally. So once you have everything ready, the games you put in your folder, you hit Save to Steam, and then from there, if you go back to gaming mode, you'll be able to go into your library and find those games. But this trips everyone up. Don't look in Steam OS compatible. If we go down to G for God of War, it just is not going to be there. But if we go all the way up to the top of the menu, you're going to see Steam OS compatible, all games installed, collections, as well as non-Steam. You want to be in the non-Steam tab for any of this stuff to show up, or you need to be in the all games tab. Honestly, non-Steam seems to work the best for me. And then from there, you'll see all the different standalone emulators that you can launch into, but really you want to add the games to the game folders. And you'll see here that God of War, even though I gave it the artwork, it just did not save, and that's something that I feel like it's a coin flip whether or not it's going to work. But what does work 100% of the time if you set it up correctly is hitting the play button and getting into the game in and of itself. And don't worry, I will do an RPCS 3 emulation guide for Steam Machine specifically because I know that is something that trips a decent amount of people up. I've actually already baited, I just haven't aired it yet because I wanted EmuDeck to go first. But if you followed along with this video, you've installed EmuDeck, you have all the BIOS you need for the systems you want to run in the right folder, you know where to put your games, you know how to install new additional emulators, you know how to switch up your resolutions, screen filters, get retro achievements and cloud saves, and basically anything else. And if you did skip around and you got lost, please don't do that. These are made in an order from start to finish to make sure you guys are successful with them. And outside of an RPCS 3 setup guide and a stress test video to see how far I can push the emulation, if you want any specific emulator tutorials, leave me a comment down below. But short of that, go start emulating some retro games on Steam Machine, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.